Good day and welcome back to my channel. So as you can see, we've gotten some work done on the pearl, and I have some things to talk about when it comes to that. So let's just go ahead and crack in on what I've done and where I've come. So I apologize that this is sort of a big ship and my field of view is a little bit limited, but first thing I want to talk about are the masts, right? So I did say that there was going to be, that when I talked about the masts earlier, right, about how it's going to use rope on them and then repaint them and re-weather them, which I've done. What I found was essentially all I did was I continued to use that black gray, which has that very soft, it's this stuff here. It's that very soft gray. It's still gray. It's clearly gray, not black, but it weathers up and down. So it gets light. You can lighten it and darken it with different washes. I chose to wash the pearl with Moen oil. I actually like working with this stuff because most of what I do is in acrylics, and before I move on to an oil level paint or painting, I'll do all the acrylics first, and that's kind of what I've done so far. Finished all the weathering, got all the ropes in. So let's talk about how I handled the shroud. So I talked about doing the I'm going to go ahead and angle you down a bit here. I talked about replacing the shrouds and ratlines with rope, which I did. Okay, so these are the ones that had where the dead eyes were in separate pieces so that you could wrap them with string. These up here were the ones where the dead eyes were included just directly to those. So couple things to think about here. These glue on, they just kind of stick into space and glue in. Now that part relies on the fact that there's a anchor point up here, or at the, basically at the top of the piece, that will clip into a hole, right? So this right here, so that will pin in there, and then down here would be where they would connect into there. So that would hold those in place. If you're not going to do that, then you need to figure out something else. And what I ended up having to do was I sort of cheated. I used what's the word I'm looking for? Here, I used this stuff, the micro liquid tape, to actually put those pieces together. So I connected on these guys. Let me skip over here in the instruction level here. So I actually did this. So I took the back one, here that has the connector to the hull, and used micro liquid tape to the big shroud ratline piece, made them into one piece, glued these guys into place, then carefully removed the shrouds and ratline part, this part, from that, glued the top part on, then ran the cabling. That was, it worked. And then I found I didn't have that option here for these shrouds. And the expectation is on these guys, or on these stays. On these stays, you're actually expected to glue them in place, hold them in place till they go, so you can then, what I did with these was exactly what you're supposed to do with the stays. That's part of the instructions. The trick is getting these in place. What I ended up doing is I cheated, and I used CA glue. I used CA glue to get them in place. Then I went back with Tamiya Thin and overlaid a layer of Tamiya Thin so that this is all now tight. There's still some detail painting to clean up those joins, but I found that to be the best when it came to actually linking those in. Another getcha that I got, or that I ran into with running the shrouds. Remember, I had said, maybe you don't remember, but I had said I was going to go in and wrap them around the mast and take them down. The problem is they won't stay put if you just do that. So what I ended up doing was where that piece right there goes in, I drilled through the mast. I used my Dremel. I used my low-speed Dremel, and I drilled through the mast and threaded the shrouds through, wrapped around the mast, and came back down. And basically what I did is I did this. So I did all this working back to front. You know, that's how I did all of the rigging piece. So once I got the shrouds on, right? So I went and I got the shrouds on for the back two pieces. Then I went and did the ratlines, and I used the Harry Houdini magic mystery tool and slid that behind the shrouds, and it goes up in under there, right? And that's what holds that in place. And then you wrap, well, before you do that, you wrap the rat lines through here, and you can see that's the line of straight across for those. And then to get the same angle for the other, you reverse it. I will put a link down below to the video for Harry Houdini Models, who actually came up with using that tool. You know, he came up with it when he was working on another ship that recommended using a loom and then sort of gluing all things on, but it was difficult to keep everything tight. So this allowed for the actual tightening of the shrouds. Then you just go back and attach the rat lines. I really recommend it. So the thought process here was, is this, you know, I bought a lot of extra work for myself. So with these, when I put these on, remember where these were actually attached to those, I went ahead and glued these in, just snipped this off, then tied the shrouds around the tie that was already at the top of the deadeye. So the anchor point was actually fairly straightforward. I didn't even have to drill through the deadeye to go through. In Harry's video, he did. I did not, because of the way this piece was done. Harry's piece didn't have the piece of the shroud coming out the top to attach to where mine do. If you choose to do the hand done rat lines and shrouds, those are the two big gotchas, right? It's getting these to glue in straight, and then the attachment point up here. I like it. I prefer this look to this piece, these pieces. Now, again, I'm just going to say what I said in my last video. These are very good pieces. These shrouds and rat lines are very good pieces. They will work very well, and you will save yourself 2 weeks worth of, you know, very, very deliberate threading of thread and tying of knots and yada, yada, yada. But it is, in my opinion, for my eye, this is my model. I like it. It's consistent. I will go ahead and, like I said, I'll put the video to Harry's video below, or the link to Harry's video below, so that you can see how he actually did that on his Bounty. Then I did the stays. And again, this is where I depart from the instructions. This is where we got to start thinking, right? So the instructions have you working front to back to get your stays on. I found that working back to front is actually better, because as I put these stays in and get that tied to the main mast, I only have to work around my shrouds. If I'd actually had these stays in place, then I'd have to work around them. So working this way is actually better than the instructions telling you what the instructions tell you, which is to work this way. Going through and following the instructions are actually very good. Another get you warning. These pieces here, right? They're two-part block and tackle pieces, but they're two-part this way. And you can kind of see this loop right here, which is where you're supposed to put the thread. There's a seam there, right? So your top piece comes partly over, the bottom piece comes partly over, and you're expected to glue those. That means you're going to have thread pulling right on that seam. You can guess what happens. Like there's one there, there's one there, there's one up the front, there's one down here. These pieces here, right? They're part of your stays. So you're going to have a bit of tension on those guys. What I chose to do in many cases was wrap. When I brought the rope back through here, when I brought the rope back through here, I did a loop around the base of it to go back up and pulled it tight. So the actual tension of the string helped hold that piece together. I also glued it like 2 or 3 times with Tamiya thin so that hopefully that is fused, but I don't trust that. So I felt like I needed to do a little bit of extra work there. So that's another gotcha to think about. Another thing to start thinking about is all of these little pulleys, right? All of these part number I-25s. You've got a whole bunch of these guys. These are going to be mostly for your sheets, your ties for your sails. I think they're called sheets. You're expected to use this. Now, this number 2 thread, this is what you're supposed to use for all of this, which I did. What you will find, however, is that those pulleys are exactly the right diameter as the hole. The hole in the pulleys. There, you see those? Right in here. This is easy, right? This diameter is bigger. That hole right there is almost exactly the same diameter as the thread. To the point where I could not thread the number 2 through those pulleys. And it's relevant here. And it's relevant on one of these pieces in the back. Can't remember which one, that one. Right, so up near, let's go ahead and put this in frame. Up here, this stay goes up there. There's another one up top, along here up the top. Bring this guy down. There, you see that rope right there? Goes up through a pulley. And then there's another stay here, does the same thing, goes up through a pulley. It didn't fit, which meant I had to be creative. I had some thread from another ship model that's just a hair thinner, and it's also wound tighter so it doesn't fray. This frays and furs very, very quickly. I ended up beeswaxing a lot of it just so I could get it to not come apart while I was working with it. So that's going to be a getcha. You also have this number 1 thread, and these I believe are meant for the sheets. I think these are the threads we're going to use for the sheets. I'll talk about that in a minute. This goes through the pulleys fairly well. That will feed through without too much difficulty. You can put it in a beading needle and it'll go. But the number 2 does not. So that is another getcha. So think about that when you're looking at doing these. How are you going to thread those pulleys? You can drill out all 8 million of these things to make the hole a little bit bigger, or you can find a slightly smaller diameter thread, which is the choice I made, to get that to work. So what I'm going to do, right now, those are the 2 big gotchas that I got, right? So now all the stays are on, all the mast work is on, all the pulleys for the sheets are in. You've got all these little tiny pulleys here that right here and all up along through there. Make sure you get all those as you're going through. There's some you tie to your shrouds here and here. Getting all those in place is a little bit of a challenge, but if you follow your directions patiently. And what I ended up doing as I did these was marking each one as I did it. I missed this one, which is the foremast, right about middle part of the mast. I missed doing those pieces. And I'm sitting there looking at it like, wait, where is it? And I saw that I had marked it off, so it helped me do that. So doing all that little marking, if you're going to work this way, is, I found to be a good idea. Again, look at your instructions. Spend some time looking at how your instructions are laid out, because now that we move on to the sheets, I'm going to give you another bit of heads up. I mentioned earlier on that these pieces now are called to go on after you put on the ratlines and shrouds. And I missed what this meant, where that you actually tie the length of rope that you need to each one of these belay points, glue them down, and have extra hanging out when you put these on, and then these go up to your sheets. I put those pieces on already. They're already on before I've tied the rope. So now I need to do my rope individually as I am tying on the sails. Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to do, and I knew I was going to have a bit of a headache to do it. But I am going to, if I were to go back and do this again, I would do this. I would use these measurements, and I would add about 4 centimeters to each one of these to give yourself some extra room, just to work with the thread. The other thing that I will say is the thread is what you're supposed to use for the sheets is this tan. When I looked at the pearl is black, 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 black. It's all black. So, especially the ghost pearl, which is what I'm doing. So, I am bringing in some smaller black thread. I just ordered another spool of smaller diameter black thread. So, I'm going to use it. But now what I said about reading your instructions, working back to front. You see how this has you attaching back to these lines, right? But now you're going to have to go put these sails on while working around all these. And you have to do that. So if you work front to back, you put these sails, and all the ties for the sails come back to about here, to these points. Now this line is in the way to work on these sails. And the same thing will happen here. So what I noticed was skip to section 61, which is here. Don't go all the way to the end, but go almost. Skip to section 61 and now work backwards. So this will allow you to tie, so basically look at this page. So I'm going to do this page sort of in this order, but then I'm going to step backwards. So I'm basically going back to front. So that is the plan now to work on the sails. The sails. I am not using the cast sails. I'm going to use handmade sails because I want them to be ratty, torn, and shredded. So instead of this, I want this. So I'm going to do another video on how I made these. It'll be somewhat long because it's a bit of a process. So I will use these sails. I'm going to cut off the yard arm from each of the sails, use that yard arm for my custom made sails. And then that's what will go on, because this is the look I'm looking for. Probably my next video will be how I made the sails. Then the video after that will be how I put them on. So that's where I am now on the pearl. Once I get all that done, then there's detail work and final finishing painting and putting on the crew, yada, yada, yada. So there's still a very great deal of work to do on this kit. And I am very, 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 very happy with how it's turning out. It's been a heck of a learning experience, learning how to do all this stuff. Like I said, there are things I've found that if I were to do differently, I would, I would adjust the instruction sheet accordingly. And those are sort of things I've called out throughout these videos for folks who are watching. So I hope that's helpful, or at least entertaining and enjoyable. And I will go on and move on to working on the sails, and then we'll get that video out. Again, I expect that to be a long one. And then we'll do the sails, and I'll be back. So until next time, I hope this was entertaining, and happy modeling.